Hi. In 1984, as an owner of one of the original 128K Macintoshes, I was very interested in knowing how to make fonts for it. It came with a set of fonts named after cities like New York, Monaco, Geneva, Athens, but there seemed to be no way for an ordinary user like me to make fonts. As a graphic designer and aspiring type designer, this was something I really wanted to do. A solution arrived in the July 1984 issue of St. Mac, an early magazine devoted to the Macintosh. There was an article on the last page saying that if you sent $100 plus tax to Apple, you'd get a set of disks containing supplemental software, that is, developer tools, including something called Font Editor. This was exactly what I was looking for, so I sent the check. Font Editor 2.0, as far as I can remember, had no manual or documentation. By trial and error in many system crashes, I managed to figure out how it worked. I was able to design a handful of bitmap fonts in sort of preliminary stages. A few months later, Alt-Sys released Fontastic, a commercial bitmap font editor for the Mac that was better than Font Editor in almost every way. And that's where I did most of my bitmap font work, such as it was. My vision was to sell a set of these fonts like clip art. But after Apple introduced the laser writer in 1985, and Alt-Sys released Fontographer, an app for making PostScript fonts that you could use with it, I lost interest in making bitmap fonts. Font Editor is very primitive and tricky to work with if you don't know what you're doing. It appears to only work on a 128K or 512K Macintosh. The only emulator I've gotten it to work with is a custom 128K Macintosh variant of Mini VMac. I'll put a link to that in the description below if you want to try it yourself. The original disk included Mac System Software 1.0 from 1984, but it will also run under System Software 2.0 from 1985, but nothing later. For this demo, I'm going to be working in a 128K variant of Mini VMac on a modern MacBook Pro. Here we are on my MacBook Pro, and here is Mini VMac. I will launch this and drag the 100K disk onto it. And let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So when you first look at the disk here, you can see I've set up my disk here with System Software 2.0 from, let's see, 1985, April 1985. So this is the version that came with the 512K Macintosh. It includes enhancements such as a shutdown command and Mini Finder and a new folder command, which was missing earlier. In this disk that I've set up here, I've got a font editor, a copy of Font DA Mover version 1.5, a copy of ResEdit version 0.5, one of the first versions. This will be used later on. Both of these will be used later on. And a font suitcase called Fonts, which is required when you're running Font Editor if you want to get fonts out of the program into font resources. And then I have a set of font documents, which are kind of generic files that the font editor can read and write, but you can't install them as these documents. They're not system resources yet. Then I also have a suitcase on this 800K disk that contains a bunch of early Apple fonts in case you want to play with them in Font Editor, and also a folder containing a bunch of font documents of early fonts that I made with Font Editor in case you want to look at those. So you don't have to set it up exactly like this. I've also created a 400K disk, which I'll show you here. The 400K disk has all of the same stuff except it does not have the extra Apple fonts, and it does not have the folder of fonts from me. And I've also pared down the number of fonts in the system to save space. If you want to save even more space on this, you can delete the 24-point starter fonts. So, let's see, get rid of that. So when you first start up Font Editor, which I'll do now, you'll see that it says enter the name of the font, and it's pre-populated with the name system. You can't leave it this way. If you do, you'll get a crash, as if I'll show you what happens. See, didn't work. Have to start up again. Okay. What it's looking for here is the name of a font document. This would be one of the documents that's on the startup disk. I've provided several that are based on Geneva and New York. One of them is called Sans 12, another one is Sans 24, and Serif 12 and Serif 24. So let's open up Sans 12, and it has to be typed exactly like the file name in the Finder. If you make any mistakes, it'll beep and complain, and you'll end up with a blank document you can't do anything with. I'll just demonstrate that. If I just type sans, see it beeps, and there you can't do anything in here. You can try using some of these commands here, but they don't do anything. So I'm just going to quit, launch it again, and type in sans 12. And since this font is 12 point, I'm just going to leave 12 here for current size and new size. The interesting thing here, if you change new size to something else, you can take an existing font and scale it up or down. So if I typed in 24 here, then it would make a new font that would be 24 point. It would double the size of all the pixels. So we do this, and there it is. So this is basically 12-point Geneva as it existed on the old Mac. Now, as you look in the window here, there's the large window at the top that says Font Editor 2.0, and this smaller window below. The large window is the active editing area. This is like the edit window. If you click inside this rectangle here, this dotted rectangle, you can turn pixels on and off. And you're basically editing the font when you do this. You can have serifs on the top and the bottom. Do whatever you want. Maybe you want to make an A like that. Now, notice right away, there is no undo. So if you make a mistake, you just have to start over. If you decide that's not how you want it to look. As I said, this is a very primitive program. Now, if you want to work on a different letter, you can just click on any of the letters to the left or right, and it will jump to that letter. If you want to go further, click down in this smaller window, which is a preview of the font at actual size, and you can just jump right to another letter. I think this is actually a pretty cool way to navigate through a font. And I've never seen this kind of interface on a font editor since then. One thing also, this close box up here doesn't do anything. And there is in fact no close command. In terms of what else you can do here, there is the edit menu, insert character, asks for the number of a new character. I'm not going to do it here because this is already full of characters, and you have to type in the ASCII code of the character. So if you happen to delete a character, you could add it back in. Say it was the letter E, which is ASCII code 69. You could put it back in here. I'm just going to cancel that. Another thing you can do is delete a character with the delete character command. This could be handy if you wanted to start over with a character with a completely new design. Let's say you delete the E. Okay, so that was character code 69. Now you can do insert character, and I can type in 70, which is the F, and use that as the basis. Oops, it didn't work. Insert character. Oh, 69. There we go. And then it asks for the character to copy. And now we have two Fs, and we can turn that back into an E. So that is one way you might want to use the insert character and delete character together if you wanted to copy an existing character into something, because there is no way to copy and paste character images other than that. The next command is character left, which is Command L, which you can see shifts the character to the left. If I do it again, you'll notice the left edge disappears. So if we do character right, which is the opposite, you'll see it doesn't come back. If we want that back in there, we have to draw it. Character up and character down do a similar thing. And of course there are, shortcuts for these. So if you really got into this, you could speed things up by using the keyboard shortcuts. And then the last two items are insert column, which inserts a row of pixels along the left edge, and delete column, which does the opposite. And that covers the edit menu. The next one to the left here is the height menu. These commands make changes to the entire font. So if you do more accent, it added a row of pixels to the top of the font. So I'll do this again so you can kind of see that. And this is basically how you can make larger or smaller point sizes, is by adding or removing pixels from the top or bottom of the font as you needed. You can do the same thing to the decent. So you have to add or subtract from both the accent and the decent. So if you notice there's a dotted line, the baseline here at the bottom of the characters. So everything above that is the accent, and everything below that is the decent. So if you wanted to add, say, double the number of pixels tall, you'd have to count here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So this font is 15 pixels tall, even though it's a 12-point font. That's pretty typical of the fonts from this era. If you wanted to make it twice as tall, you'd need to add 3 more to the bottom and 12 more to the accent. So 3 more to the decent and 12 more to the accent to double the height. Okay, so that's it for the height menu. The file menu, the first choice is read font. And with read font, now notice that when I go to do this, it doesn't ask me if I want to save changes. This is, as I mentioned, a very primitive tool. There's no precautions for things like that. It doesn't. You can very easily lose work in this if you're not paying attention, or if you're not careful. So you can do save font, which in this case, since this is a font document, if I choose save font, it will save into that font document. So here it's saving sans 12. In fact, I'll show you how this works. So let's say I change the B, the design of the B here. Do something kind of weird. Okay, so that's our new B. And I do save font. And then we'll quit. And you'll notice if I do get info on this, that it was just saved today, June 4th at 6:54 p.m. So, and you can't double click on these either to open, because this is unlike normal Mac programs. There isn't any application ID or document ID on this application or this document. So, like if I double click on the font suitcase here, it'll open Font DA Mover, but double clicking these font editor documents doesn't do anything. So you have to basically just load font editor and then type in the file you want to open. And it's so primitive, it doesn't even have open and save dialog boxes within the app. You just have to know which file you want to open and make sure you, oops, I made a mistake. Let's try that again, read font. Oh, I forgot the S, see? There we go. And you can see here's our modified B as we saved it here. So I'm going to make that back the way it was and then save it again. You can see now how read font works. Now you can also do save font in, which is kind of like a save as command. So let's say you made a bunch of changes, but you don't want to save over the original document. So you can do save font in, and let's just call this sans mod 12. And now if we quit, we will see, yeah, here it is. So here's our new font, sans mod 12. So it's created a new font document. Now these generic font documents can only be opened or saved from Font Editor. Just in case you're wondering, get rid of that. And I'll start again. I'm just going to put in sans 12 just so it doesn't complain. Okay. Now you can also load from resource, and what this does is allows you to load a font from the system file. So let me just quit and show you. If you start up Font DA Mover and you look at the system here, see there's a bunch of fonts installed. Many old familiar fonts: Chicago, Geneva, London, Monaco, New York, Venice, all the classics. In fact, there's another suitcase on here, more Apple fonts, where you can find even more of the early Apple fonts, including some, like a really huge version of New York and San Francisco, which is a lot of fun, Taliesin, Toronto, etc. But okay, so in Font Editor now, what we want to do is, and by the way, you can't cancel on this dialog. It'll just crash if you try to cancel. So I'm going to avoid doing that. I'll just open this again. Okay. So load from resource, what it's wanting here is the name of a font that's installed in the system. So let's say New York. And in this case, we just put the name of the font in the top, not the document name. For the size, we need to know which size we want to open. I'm going to open size 24 here, and we're not going to scale it, so there's no new size. And it loads it from the system, and there's New York 24, which is based on ITC Garamond. And now I'll show you something else. Let's see. I'll just quit here. Now, I need to talk about this fonts suitcase. So if I open this up, you'll see it only has one font in it. The reason I did that was because I think you need to have at least one font in a font suitcase. So that's all that's in there right now. So we'll just quit this. I just wanted to show you what was in there. Now, let's see. I'm going to do... Now let's say we open our Sans 12. Okay. And let's say we want to install this on a Mac and use it. Let's say you've made a cool font and we want to install it somewhere. The way we do that is by install font. Now you would think this would install it into the system, but it doesn't do that. You need to not provide the size up here, just the name of the font. Let's say we're going to call this my font and it's size 12. Now what it's doing is it's installing it into that fonts suitcase. So if you open this up again, you'll see, okay, so there's Venice, which is in there before, and now my font, which is just a copy of Geneva 12. Now one thing you need to know about this is after you created a font, a set of fonts even, you don't want to just leave them like that, because what happens is each font in the old Mac system had a font number, and they range from 0 to 255, and Apple reserved the first half of those, so 0 to 127. Unfortunately, the font number that it assigns by default is 12, which is the same number as one of the old Apple Macintosh fonts called Los Angeles. If you install it on a Mac that already has Los Angeles on it, they're going to conflict with each other, and all of a sudden Los Angeles will lose its name and it will be called My Font or whatever, and things will be all screwed up. So you basically need to change the font number on this to something else, something that's not already being used by the system. But I'll get into that later after we run over all the stuff in Font Editor. So undo changes, I don't know what that's supposed to do, but all it does is crash the system. So here, I'll just show you. Or it doesn't do anything. It just beeps. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to do. Finally, there's this aids menu, and here it will show a sample window. If you leave this open while you're making changes, so let's change the H, or let's say the H here. I'll add serifs to the H. And then notice it didn't update it, so you have to click redraw, and now you can see the H with the serifs on it. You can also change the sample text by choosing Set Sample Text. So we'll do the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And there it is. So that's the sample text window. This is pretty much all you can do in Font Editor. It's, as I said, it's a very primitive, kind of simple program. It doesn't have a lot of features. It just has the bare minimum for opening and modifying characters and saving them as font resources. One thing I should mention here too is there doesn't appear to be any way to create a new empty font in Font Editor. There's no new command. It only seems to be able to open existing fonts, either font documents or loading from the system file. At one point I thought that it could do that, because when you first started it up, if you didn't give it what it wanted, it would open a blank document, but there's nothing you can do with that blank document. So my theory is that the folks at Apple had other methods or tools that could make fonts from scratch that existed before Font Editor 2.0. And that's where the fonts were originally created. And they used this tool simply to modify existing fonts and to turn them into font resources when that feature was added to the Mac OS. There was an earlier period during the development of the Macintosh when fonts were not system resources. They were just plain documents like in the Finder. At one point, Andy Hertzfeld came up with the idea of storing them as font resources, and that they would be installed in the system file, and you could even install them into application files if an application wanted its own custom font, for instance. And I think this program was mainly designed to make the transition from these older font documents to font resources, which I'll now get into. So we'll just quit this. You notice it didn't ask me if I wanted to save changes. Something to be aware of. As I mentioned, Font Editor by default assigns font number 12 to any fonts created in the app, including new fonts or fonts derived from existing fonts. Font number 12 also happens to be the number for Apple's Los Angeles font. So if you install your new font into the font suitcase file and it contains Los Angeles, it'll be a problem. For example, let's say you have a font suitcase containing Los Angeles 12 and 24, which are the two sizes that Apple shipped. You make a new font called MyFont24. Using Font DA Mover, you put MyFont24 into that font suitcase. It'll wipe out Los Angeles 24. It'll replace it. And Los Angeles 12 will suddenly be called MyFont12, even though it looks like Los Angeles 12. The same is true with any fonts you've made previously, since they are also assigned the same font number 12. The key to avoiding this issue is to change the font number on your font from 12 to something else as soon as you install it into the fonts file. In order to do this, you'll need to use ResEdit. So ResEdit is this cool app that is really fun to play with it. You can make icons in it, you can edit dialog boxes, you can mess with all the stuff that's inside Mac apps in interesting ways. You can also do a lot of damage if you don't know what you're doing. So what I'm going to do now is open ResEdit. If I open the fonts, this is the font suitcase that we're looking at here. And if I open here, we can see MyFont 12 and Venice 14. You notice it has an ID next to it. Now this is supposed to be font number 12, so why does it say 1548? Fonts are stored in font resources, F-O-N-T, with all caps. You can see it right here. If you open the system file in ResEdit, you'll see the font IDs are larger numbers. They don't look like numbers from 0 to 127. They're larger numbers. So what's going on here? This is because the font ID, which we're looking at here, is a combination of the font number and the font size. This is calculated by multiplying the font number by 128 and then adding the size. So for instance, Chicago is font number 0. So 0 times 128 plus 12 is 12, right? So Chicago 12 is just 12. That's the font ID. Geneva's font number is 3. Multiply that by 128 and add 9 and you get 393. So that's how it works. So to fix the font number on our new font, we go into the fonts suitcase here, and now instead of just double clicking on this, if you double click on it you get this display. That's not what we want, because that's not giving us access to all the information in there. That's giving us sort of a font DA mover kind of view of the resources. What we want to do is hold down the Option key and double click. And now we're actually seeing more detailed information here. So you can see Venice, the name Venice has the ID of 640. So 640 divided by 128 is 5. So that's 5 times 128, because Venice is font number 5. And then my font has an ID of 1536. So 1536, divided by 128 is 12, just as I said. So basically these name IDs, if I double click on here, oops, that's not right. Don't double click on those. Okay, let's get back here. So, Option click, open that. Now, don't double click on these, because that does not work, as we just saw. What we want to do is do get info. You'll see that Venice, it's 128 times 5, which is 640, plus 0. So that's how we get this 640 here. Now, if you look at the next entry here, which is ID 654, and we do get info on that, this is actually the font data itself. So this is the image that you see when you type the font. So this is basically 640 plus 14. So it's 128 times 5 plus 14. So basically you have two parts to the font resource. There's the name, and then also the bitmap data. Like if you have multiple sizes, you'll see more of these, but you only ever see one name entry. So this is basically the name entry. So like if I change this to something else, like let's say call it script, all right? Now if we actually went back and quit, let's see, close this and save it, and then go back to the Finder and open this font suitcase, you'll see that Venice has now been renamed to script. So that's how that works. Okay, well, let's fix that. We don't want to leave that way. All right. Let's say we want to give our font the number 44. Technically, that's one of the Apple's reserved font numbers, but they never made any really past around 20 or so. So I think it's okay to use that for our purposes here. So first we want to get info on this. Here I'm going to use Spotlight here to do the calculation. So 44 times 128 is 5632. So going back here, we'll type in 5632. All right? So you need to remember that, 5632. And don't worry about this missing thing here. That's just a cosmetic thing. It just hasn't redrawn the window. So for the actual bitmap font, we want to take 5632 and add 12 to it. If we do get info here, so 5632 plus 12 is 5644. And now we've basically reassigned the IDs on these two resources here so that they correspond to font number 44. And now we don't have to worry about conflicts with Los Angeles. because who wants that? And then it'll ask if you want to save this, and we say yes. And now if we quit and we go to this font suitcase here, and let's say we open more fonts, Apple fonts here, and we find Los Angeles. If we copy that over there, they coexist. If we hadn't changed the font number on this My font, then when we moved Los Angeles over here, it would have wiped it out. It's just a limitation of the way the fonts worked on the early Mac systems. So I'm going to just remove that. Quit. So that's it. You're all done. You can now install this font wherever you like, at least if it's an old Mac system that works with old fonts like this. Now, just some closing thoughts. A font editor is not the tool I would recommend if you want to make screen fonts for vintage Macs. My purpose in creating this video is to preserve a small but significant piece of Macintosh history. The Mac was the first affordable computer that went beyond the 40 or 80 column by 25 line text display typical of personal computers in the early years. The Mac could display multiple proportional or fixed width fonts in different sizes and styles anywhere on the screen. This is a radically new thing at the time. Almost certainly, the early fonts on the Mac were made using Font Editor, this app that I've just been showing you, by people like Susan Kerr and Bill Atkinson. With this video, you should be able to try it yourself, following my instructions, and see what it was like. If you actually did want to make bitmap fonts for old Mac systems, a better choice would be Fontastic, which is available online. There's a few different versions. Fontastic Plus is the best version. And it has a lot more options. You don't have to worry about messing with font IDs, and it also works with later systems where they expanded the whole font resource system to allow for font families and a lot more font IDs than just 512 like the original Mac. So anyway, I hope you found this video illuminating or maybe even useful. And that's the end of my demo. Thank you.